Ancestors Against the Dysgenesis of Modernity. This is Govan here with GovanKilgour.com. There's an image at the intro of my videos you've seen now, which is the zodiac wheel with the alphabet, the Latin alphabet or English alphabet written around the outside of it. This is a very simple concept which at first glance it seems kind of benign, like what's so special about our alphabet? A lot of people think of like all the cool esoteric metaphysical alphabets as being like Sanskrit or Hebrew or runes and these other things. They are in their own right, but I think a lot of people overlook the value or insight one can glean from the Latin alphabet, and specifically the English alphabet and the way words have been constructed and used over time and how our English language has developed. I think it has a lot more interesting things going on than people realize. And specifically when applied to the zodiac here, we can see some interesting, you could call them coincidences or patterns, correlations, which emerge, which I think, as you'll see over our next couple of videos, that there's something profound going on, whether these were intentionally done while language was created and formed, or if people, specifically in the next two videos, which are going to be more based around groups or larger religions or secret societies who have specific goals on the world stage, whether they used this type of a formula to look at things and to shape their their system. They might have used this just because there's almost too many things going on that seems to fit too perfectly. This also could just be coincidence in the sense that these are things going on in the universe, and astrology has the ability to show us a divine language that's taking place or a divine order that exists in the world, and that people just fall into these things. And I probably maybe even tend to side more with that viewpoint, where a lot of the things that we see with this just happen to work because there's something to the zodiac as a sort of map of archetypes and the symbols within it and the layers. As you get deeper into these layers, there's things one can see going on. Now, this first video I wanted to do is just to go over each letter, and as you see, because there's 26 letters in the alphabet, there's 12 signs. It doesn't divide perfectly. There's some signs that have almost like 3, most have 2 letters that are in the sign, but you have those ones that are on the cusp, which kind of straddle 2 signs. And what we see from that is just a few things. So generally, as we work our way around, we see either the name for the sign or the shape of the symbol of the sign, or even the name for that image in the symbol is often represented in the letters that fall into that sign. And in a few cases, it's a bit of a longer stretch, but in most cases it's a pretty good fit. And there's often some letters which don't get counted here, so I think I have something written in for maybe 3/4, if not a little bit more of all the letters, but some of the other letters have more significance, as you'll see in other videos when we talk about sort of the oppositions between letters and what that is seen in terms of the oppositions we see with different groups, both at present but also in history, and sort of the qualities of each sign or zodiac sign, and also the planets of those signs that are associated with those movements. So let's just begin. We're going to start with A and B in Aries. And obviously the word Aries starts with an A. There's an association there. The symbol for Aries, if you flip it upside down, it looks like the letter A. Aries is, of course, represented as a ram. Not a goat, as some people say. It's a ram, which is specifically a male sheep. Obviously, the wild sheep we tend to think of as rams because they all have the horns, whether they're male or female, but a ram is specifically a male sheep. And you have those sort of mountain goats, which, yeah, they're obviously related to sheep, and then you have certain, I guess, species of them which are closer to, I guess, domesticated sheep. But the male ones are the rams. And then the Latin name for sheep is Ovis Aries. That's where the word Aries has connection to. And if you look at the shape of Aries, even though we think of Aries as almost like a hyper-masculine zodiac sign, it's ruled by Mars. And the ram is like that single-pointed focus, driving forward energy. But Ovis sounds like ovum. It's not an exact etymological root, but it's similar. And then when we look at the Aries symbol, it does actually look like the female anatomy, the womb and ovaries, which I found quite interesting when I discovered this. Noticed that little connection. Now, before I go further, I just also want to say that some of the ideas within this I actually got from a great YouTuber I highly recommend checking out. I'll link to his video specifically about the alphabet and the zodiac, which I use as a jumping off point for this short series. And a lot of influence on all the stuff on astrology I get from him, so I definitely need to shout out to his work, and that's B.R. Taylor on YouTube. He also has a Bitchute channel as a backup. And that being said, I do have certain things I'm talking about which he didn't talk about. So I have to acknowledge his inspiration, but I have added a lot of my own things that I found in looking at this further. Something that he talked about was with the letter B and A. When you connect those up, you have the connection to Abraham or Abram, and you have the word ram in there with the A and B, and Abraham in terms of the biblical time frame would have lived during the age of Aries, I believe at the start of it. And even though we think of like Christianity as being a Piscean age religion, it really had that start much further back if we're talking about their view of the timeline. So the age of Aries being definitely dominated by the Aries sign, you see a lot of that symbolism both in the names of people and other things like that. And there's also an etymological root, I believe this is confirmed, between Abraham and Brahmin. So if we're going on to the letter B, Brahmin, as in the Brahmins of India, who were the Indo-Aryans, the people of Aries, they had that origin. And it is believed that as a larger group who were going southeast towards the Indus Valley and Persia, you would have had a splinter group come off of them who may have been what eventually became the people that lived in the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean area and became the Israelites and things like that. If you're enjoying these new videos that I've been creating here, I'd ask that you check out a link in the description below if you'd like to help support me in continuing to make future content. It is a browser that I highly recommend people use, at least check out, but potentially use. It's called Brave. It is a privacy browser which has a number of features that protects your identity. It's not as secure as, say, using the Tor browser. However, it is also able to be used with a lot of social media. So a lot of websites will block you from using them using Tor just because it's so, well, it makes you so hidden as a user that certain sites won't allow you to use it. But a good in-between level of privacy that Brave offers is a good alternative, and it's definitely far superior to just your regular Firefox, Chrome, or these other browsers which do not offer anywhere near as much protection as the Brave browser does. In addition to that, you can actually earn money through cryptocurrency by using the browser. It has an ad blocker built into it, but you can enable its own type of ads to be displayed, and they're very non-invasive. I recommend setting it to the maximum allowable advertising rate because you get a little bit of a cryptocurrency called the Brave Attention Token, which is on the exchanges, crypto exchanges, it's referred to as BAT, B-A-T. kind of ironic in these times that that's the name of it, but it's been around for a bit. The price per bat has fluctuated from between at the lows, I've seen it at like a little over 10 cents per token. At the highs, it's been last summer, it was at 50 cents a token. So right now they pay out based on what it's worth in dollar values. So just by using the browser right now and you begin accumulating this token, it takes a while to accumulate much. You might make around $5 worth of the token a month if you're using the browser consistently and have the ads set to the maximum allowable number of ads. But, this builds up, and when and if the token goes up in price next time Bitcoin has a rally, you're going to see that amount grow because you're being paid out while the token is of low value. And when there's a new higher set point for Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies, that becomes sort of the average, that amount that they pay out will become less because the overall value of a Brave token will have gone up. So you understand what I'm explaining here. But definitely check it out. There's a video and other descriptors about it on there. And just like any affiliate link, just by going through my link, if you choose to use the browser and you use it consistently for about a 2-month period, I get a little bit of a kickback in the form of Brave tokens myself. And that's definitely going to help me out in the future. And I'll do more in-depth explanations and videos on this browser itself in the future because it's well worth checking out. And there's a number of words in Hebrew that are actually connected up with Sanskrit as well, Sanskrit being almost like an older version of that. Brahmin being one. Brahmin, Abraham, having that similar root. And that's a very patriarchal lineage idea. And again, we've got the Mars quality of Aries predominating here, and the names of these groups and that symbology running through them. I found that quite interesting with the first part of this whole outline of the zodiac with the alphabet. Then you have the letter C in Taurus, and obviously the word Taurus, that doesn't fit there, but you have cow, cattle, calf, and also you have the letter C that looks like the horns in the symbol for Taurus, the top part at least. Other than that, I couldn't find too many other connections. Perhaps if I sat with this longer I could find some. Also, same with the letter D. Doesn't work symbolically in that sense, but you'll see in a later video there's something else interesting going on there. But moving on to the letter E in Gemini, you have, again, not a whole lot there, but with the letter F, you have the fraternal twins. And the Gemini symbol is always shown as a young boy and girl, implying that they're twins. And you don't have identical twins that are a boy and girl. They're always fraternal twins in that case. And of course, right at the top, you have the G, which means Gemini. And even though it's on the cusp there between the two signs, you can say the G definitely stands for the Gemini. And if we are going a bit further afield than just the sign, the F could also be Fengari, which is Greek, or it might be ancient Greek actually, the word for the moon, or it's one word for the moon. I believe there's several that there are, and Fengari is just one way of saying the moon. And that obviously, the next sign in Cancer is ruled by the moon. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And if we do go over to H, which is in Cancer, you have the ancient god Hermes, who is synonymous with Mercury. So in this case, we do have a letter for each, which they're not in the sign that this word represents. They're close, quite close. I'm going by maximum of one over to the next sign over for making this connection here. So Hermes is a significant enough deity, I think, that has that connection to Mercury, which connects up with Gemini. Now, Cancer, being ruled by the moon, the most prominent moon goddess we could think of that begins with an H would be Hecate or Hecate. Hecate, there's different pronunciations depending on whom you ask, but that is the Greek triple-faced lunar goddess, and her origin is probably from Hecate, or Heket, the ancient Egyptian goddess of magic. So Hecate is also a goddess of magic. I don't believe Hecate's specifically a lunar deity, but there's a lot of similarities between them. The other qualities of Cancer, if you're talking about the qualities of the houses, it is representative of the fourth house, which is the home or house. And so you have that H word being synonymous with the fourth house and Cancer. And you have the letter H there. And part of that association is the crab. The symbol of Cancer always carries its home on its back and has that protection. So they definitely have this whole cyclical symbology connected up with the letter H. Then with the letter I, the only major thing I could see was, in terms of deity connections, was Ea or Aya, which is an archaic Egyptian lunar deity. They sort of morphed into an aspect of Thoth. And Thoth definitely has a connection with Hermes. They were seen as synonymous. So even though it's not under H, it's under I there. And there's also the Eye of Thoth, which was, I believe, I might have this wrong, it's the left eye, and the right eye was the eye of Horus. So the letter I, even though the word I starts with an E, the I is often seen to be like implying a connection to the physical eye. The I is a letter, that is. So the Eye of Thoth, connecting up to Aya, the ancient, archaic Egyptian deity. So there are several lunar deities in the Egyptian pantheon, and because Egypt was such a long-spanning civilization, you do have a lot of deities to look at, and many things that would go on in the world often had multiple deities associated with it, just because of this long span of time. And sometimes they morphed into one of each other, sometimes they definitely represented different aspects of one thing. So in this case with Aya, you can look into that if you want to know more about the associations with that deity. Then moving on to Leo, we have J and K. And probably the easiest thing to get from this is the lion is the king of the jungle king. Then if you actually look at the symbol for Leo, you can see that there's a J in the symbol there as well. I'm not entirely certain how old the symbols are that we have associated with the zodiac signs now. If they came about after the alphabet more or less looked the way it did, the Latin alphabet, it could be that they had someone in the past that kind of done the same thing with, as far as I know, this hasn't been found in any really ancient manuscript or anything with this written, the alphabet written around the zodiac like this, but that might have been how a lot of the symbols contain aspects of the letters within them. Like I said, with the Taurus you have the C, with Aries you have the A, not so much with Gemini or Cancer, unless you take the I in Gemini from, which is in Cancer, the I is in Cancer, but the symbol for Gemini is obviously two eyes connected up. Kind of looks like two pillars. But yeah, in most cases, it's often a letter within the sign itself that we can see in the symbol. So with Leo, you have the J. Moving on to Virgo, you have the L and M. And just as an aside, the L in Virgo being close to Leo, you could say Leo, lion, that's connected there. It's not that far away from there. You also have the rulership of Virgo being Mercury. So that could be connected up with literally the letter M. Mercury is right there in that sign. You also have deities in other systems that are synonymous with Mercury. So in the Celtic tradition, you have Lugh, and he was considered like a Celtic Mercury. He was a trickster deity, kind of like Mercury. You also have Loki in the Norse mythology. That's an L there, connecting up. Then you obviously have the symbol of Virgo itself. It has an M. It's mostly just an M. It has a little thing on the edge there, but that is pretty synonymous with the maiden. The Virgo is the virgin. You have Mary, Magdalene. Maiden starts with an M. Mother, and of course also Madonna. All of those have very Virgo-like qualities. The house of bread, Bethlehem, and that's associated with Virgo. And with the next sign being Libra, before we actually leave the M letter there, the scales, or the sort of cosmic judgment in terms of the sign that represents, you have Maat, or Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of, I guess, judgment in the afterlife. That is represented by the scales, and you have the letter M there. And that's a very prominent deity. So you have the N and O in Libra. Now, obviously with the sign, or the symbol, we have the O, and that looks like the setting sun, which is a symbol for Libra. And you've heard me talk about the zodiac as being representative of a single day, but it's also representative of the whole year. If you're starting Aries as the place where most people get up, it's like dawn, you then have the full day of work, and towards that point where Libra starts hitting, that's generally, obviously it's going to vary depending on time of year when the sun sets, but that's often going to be the time where the sun's setting, is just in that later part of the day where Libra falls, and it's symbolized by the setting sun. Now, the other thing is, if we look at the zodiac sign as the full year, that's the time when we really start to notice that the days are shortening, and that's after the fall equinox there. So the fall equinox generally occurs right in the changeover from Virgo to Libra. And it's ruled by Venus, and really the only connection I could get out of prominent past religions in terms of the deities connected to Venus was Inanna. And even though it starts with an I, it does have 3 N's in the name. Inanna is synonymous with Venus. I guess she's a Mesopotamian goddess. The Latin for the word setting is ocassum. That begins with the letter O. And one other interesting thing I noticed here, and this is a bit of a stretch, but if you're going in reverse through the zodiac, so it could be the precession of the equinox, which I talked about, and that's that longer time span when the 25,000 plus year cycle. If you're going in reverse through the zodiac signs, if you're going in reverse through Libra, you hit O and then N, so you have the word on. And if you think of light diminishing as the sun is setting, if you go reverse, it's the light coming on. Now, in the Bible, there is a place called On. O-N. It is an Egyptian, I believe it's a city, and it no longer exists, just some ruins, but it's ruins outside of Cairo. I think it's northeast of Cairo, not too far from Cairo. And this was Heliopolis. It was the place of sun worship, the most solar-focused area along the Nile, where the most sun worship occurred. They had temples to different deities, and generally you had the entire pantheon represented as different places along the Nile. And Heliopolis happened to be the place of most solar focus. And in the Bible, I guess this was the Hebrew or Aramaic word for this city was just on. So the light was on and on, meaning the solar light. And the O and N in Libra is quite interesting, I thought. It only applies in going in reverse, obviously, but when we have no light, that is going forwards through Libra, and we're starting to have the setting of the sun, the light switch turns off. That's a bit of an interesting thing, which when I noticed this, I just harkened back to those old Jordan Maxwell videos. If you ever heard him, he talked about the city of On and made that connection. Now moving on to the next sign, we have Scorpio. So we have the Q and the P in Scorpio. Interestingly, the only 2 letters in the alphabet that we say have a tail. Well, P when it's a small letter, but Q both as a capital and small letter, we say that they have a tail. And Scorpio is the sign with the stinger on the tail, scorpion. And of course, the word scorpion even though it doesn't have a Q in it, it has the hard K sound. And then you also have the P in Scorpio. And some of the other letters around there would actually be some of the main consonants in the word Scorpio. Then you also have the fact that the ruler of Scorpio is Pluto, the modern ruler. And the P is obviously in the symbol for Pluto, and that's connected up with the letter P in the sign of Scorpio. Moving on from there, we have Sagittarius. You have the S and the R, and then you also have the T on the cusp. The word Sagittarius has the S. It has the R is quite prominent there. It has several T's. It also has the S at the end. You do also have the U just over in Capricorn, not too far from there. So again, we see a lot of the letters that are found in the words for these things in the sign are very close by to it. You also have the fact that the T, a small t, makes a cross, and the sign for Sagittarius is kind of T-like. It has an arrow on it as well, and that is quite an interesting little bit of info there. And as you cross over into Capricorn, the major thing that stands out here is the letter V. That is in the sign for, or symbol for, Capricorn. If you think of the shape of it, it's really actually just the shape of the character, or the image created by the constellation of Capricorn, which is a goat with a fish or serpent's tail. It could some sort of like water serpent, it's often talked about as. Now Capricorn doesn't really have letters immediately in that area, but its rulership, Saturn, you have the U, the T, the S is just over there in Sagittarius, quite close by. And yeah, that's some of the associations there. And as we move over into Aquarius, we have the obvious waves, or I like to think of it more as lightning bolts, but the jagged symbol for Aquarius, that is simply the letter W. It's pretty obvious there. And the V very close by could be, you could think of the V attaching to the W and making sort of a longer wave, and that is highly representative of its placement there. I don't see too much of what the X could be connected to just in this sort of initial overview that we're doing here. So moving on to the last sign, Pisces, we obviously have the letter Y. That could be like Yod would be one connection. I thought it's a bit of a stretch, because if we're talking about English words, God would make more sense, and that would be with the G. But Pisces is definitely a metaphysical sign in that it's very much connected to spirituality. And if you also think of the time of day, that could be representative of that point in sleep when you're sort of reaching the deepest point of sleep is actually not too far before you wake up. So even though different people have different sleep cycles, and you're not always going to be fast asleep during that time, those who wake up very early might be waking up in the time of Pisces in terms of the 24-hour period. But if you do happen to be sleeping through this time, you may be entering that deepest sort of, I guess it's theta sleep, where you are kind of, if you've ever had sort of fragments of dreams or memories from that time period in your sleep cycle. On occasion I've got glimpses of that, and it's a very profound state, which is quite similar to really deep meditation experiences where you feel sort of like a union with God, or Yod. Yes, that's a Hebrew word for God. I'm not proposing that as the way to view the divine, but that's just one possible connection. B.R. Taylor talks about the double sign of two fish being likened to the prongs of the Y, or the each end of the Z. I didn't think that was the best connection. I think a better connection for the Z is the sign we think of falling asleep. We always think of little Zs coming out of someone's mouth as they fall asleep or are in deep sleep. And that is kind of like the culmination of it. You fall asleep at the letter Z, or you're deep in sleep at that end point in your sleep cycle towards the end of it, and you're snoring. And for whatever reason, I don't know the actual origin of the Z's for sleeping. So just in editing here, I noticed some things with both the symbol for Pisces and the symbol for Neptune. Clearly, both appear like the two letters there, the Z and the Y. The sign for Pisces on its side, as it is displayed in this image, it can easily, if you use a bit of your imagination, you could put the letter Z over top of that, and it fits quite well. Same with Neptune. The Y shape of the trident there is quite similar to the shape of the letter Y. That concludes the alphabet through the signs. And it is kind of a journey in that sense that you end up with the metaphysical sleep and the transition over into the next cycle. One final thing you can do, if you want to explore this yourself, is actually use words of things, whether it's your own name, and see what qualities your name embodies when you add up the letters around this. It might work for your first name, it might only work for your last, it might work for both, it might not work for anything. This isn't foolproof. And also the fact that there's more vowels towards the beginning of the alphabet means that it's going to be a bit imbalanced in terms of the representation of these things. And what we think of in terms of people in the world, there's a balance of the zodiac signs out there. But with a name, you just add up where they are. So if I take my first name by birth, I go by Govan, but many of you know that my first name is actually Zachary. If we go with the Z, that's Pisces. With the A, there's two A's in my name, so you've got double Aries. You've got the C, which is in Taurus, the R, which is in Sagittarius, and the Y, which is back in Pisces. And it's not a perfect representation of my birth chart, but it's fairly close, which I was surprised by. And this is not something my parents planned after I was born and they looked at my natal chart. They don't believe in astrology much, actually, as far as I understand it. My mom does maybe just a little bit more open to it than my dad, but I do have Neptune in my first house, which that could be the Z and the Y. It's quite close to my ascendant angle, so I embody a lot of those traits in my first house being myself. I identify with that. Then the double A, I do have a stellium in Aries of planets. The C, I am a Taurus sun. The R, I do have a couple planets in Sagittarius as well. My Saturn and Uranus are in my 12th house of Sagittarius. And yeah, I don't have some of the other things about myself embodied in that name, but just seeing that, I was quite surprised that some of the most prominent qualities I see in my own natal chart are represented in my name when we take into account the alphabet around the zodiac. Doesn't work as well for my middle name or my last names, but yeah, it does a little bit actually with Govan. So the G is obviously on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer. That really doesn't apply much, but the O being in Libra, I do have my 10th house as Libra, and the 10th house has to do, in a lot of cases, with your career trajectory. It's not always, when you're talking about whole signs, in alignment with your midheaven angle. My midheaven is actually in my 11th house, but Libra is kind of combined with my 11th house. So Libra being my 10th and my 11th having my midheaven angle. When you combine those, that for me has been indicative of my career trajectory. So the O there is significant. The V is Capricorn, and that is my first house. The A, Aries, we've got that connection, and also being Libra. So it's kind of like a double Libra emphasis in my middle name there. So maybe even I would take Govan and Zachary together. There's almost a really complete picture in terms of the most prominent qualities within my chart, which I have at the forefront of my mind, because I have the Capricorn as my first house, I have the Neptune in my first house, I have the Libra emphasis, I have the Aries emphasis with triple A's, 2 A's in Zachary, 1 in Govan. I have the, not sure exactly what the G could symbolize, because even though I do have houses that are represented by Cancer and Gemini, they're my 6th and 7th house. The only planet I have there would actually be Mars in my 6th. But yeah, it's just interesting to think about and kind of look at and explore yourself. I only just thought of this and came up with it just a few days ago while preparing for this video. So I haven't done it with things like places I've lived or other people in my family, but it could be worth looking into yourself. Looking at politicians' names and comparing it to their charts might be interesting. But yeah, I just hadn't done any of that yet. It's just something I wanted to throw in here at the end because I just started looking into that. So this is just touching on this interesting depth that I found with this diagram. I think you might even find the next one more interesting. And this is going off sort of from the macrocycle topic I said I'd be talking about with astrology, but this lays the groundwork for some of the things I was going to talk about when we do get back to those macrocycles. And these next 2 videos are just about some of these big groups or ideological movements that we see taking place in the world and how they connect up with the alphabet around the zodiac in this way. So with that, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, favorite, and share this video if you feel so inclined, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.